Good morning, boys and girls, and welcome to Adventures of the Broken Retired. Certainly do appreciate you being here. Myself, Don, and my old buddy Elmer, going to try to give you a little food for thought today. I'm not presenting this to you as fact. I am not a linguist. I'm presenting this to you as entertainment and as something to think about. Give your brain something to keep it busy. The other day, I was sitting around talking to Amy, which is something to do a lot of. Ain't that funny? Uh, and the subject of the letters in the English language, O-U-G-H, those four letters, came up. And I don't know if you're aware of this or not. O-U-G-H can be pronounced 7 different ways. Some people say there's 8. Some people even say there's 9. I don't count the 8th or the 9th as being real ways to do it because it just doesn't work for me. There's words like rough and tough where it's pronounced UFF. There's words like cough and trough where it's pronounced like off. There's drought where it's pronounced ow. There's thorough where it's pronounced o. And there's the word dough, where it's pronounced like dough. And then there's other ways to do it as well. Let me look at the notes here. So I have notes today. So let me look at the notes here and see what they say. Rough and tough, thorough, where it's pronounced o, like it is in dough. Bought, sought, taught, wrought, caught, not caught. Caught sounds exactly the same, but it's spelled with an A. Caught and taught. It's funny because you have bought, sought, and wrought, all pronounced exactly the same, O-U-G-H. Then you have caught and taught, which is spelled with an A. So I don't know how you're supposed to keep track. If you're coming here from another country to learn English, to learn, and you have to learn the English language, good luck, because there's so many words that are pronounced the same, they're even spelled the same, pronounced the same, or maybe pronounced different, and have different meanings. Like red, like I read a book, and red, the barn is painted red. It's pronounced exactly the same, spelled different, totally different meanings. Lead, like the product you make fishing sinkers out of, L-E-A-D, and what a leader, and they were led by General Patton, L-E-A-D. Leader, I guess lead might be L-E-D. I told you I'm not a linguist. Excuse me for the cough. I'm going to have to try to cut that out. Anyhow, there's O-U-G-H is legitimately pronounced 7 different ways. The 8th way that people want to say it's pronounced is this word right here. Now, you see how that word, I'm not going to pronounce it right off the bat. You see how that word is spelled. I have always pronounced that word hiccough, which I've always thought was a stupid word because a hiccough is a hiccup, and hiccup makes more sense. But some people say that word is pronounced hiccup, which means that the O-U-G-H sound is pronounced like the word up. I don't count that. And I don't count that because this word exists. Hiccup. This word is pronounced hiccup. The other word, as far as I'm concerned, is pronounced hiccough. Some people have just changed the pronunciation to hiccup. But I digress. There's a total of 7 legitimate ways to pronounce it. Maybe later I'll put an example of each one in. Right now I'm just kind of zipping past things to get to the point, which who knows if I ever actually will. I started doing the research. I started looking up stuff on O-U-G-H. I'm not going to lie to you. There was about a gazillion things you could come up with on O-U-G-H. It was all readily available information. It was all just sitting out there. And I thought to myself, I said, self, this you're just going to bore people to death, which I'm probably doing right now. You're just going to bore people to death talking about O-U-G-H. I wanted to come up with something else. So I'm sitting there kind of staring at the screen, looking at my notes, And one of the words with O-U-G-H is the word dough. And I started thinking about donuts, which I think is kind of a logical connection to make. And I thought to myself, you know what? There's a pretty good possibility people would much rather talk about donuts than O-U-G-H. So I decided I'd stick my nose in that a little bit and see what happened. And here's what I came up with. Let me point out to you something that you don't know. Um, I was sitting here talking to y'all, recording on the phone, and a spam call came in, and it just so happens, as it was coming in, I was looking directly at the phone. And it turned off the recording. It shut off the camera. Um, I'm going to have a talk with somebody about this spam call situation. I mean, I'm getting, no joke, I mean, no exaggeration, I'm getting between 50 and 100 every single day. I don't even, the ringer on my phone is turned off. I can't block the calls because they come from different numbers every time. I'd have to block every number on the planet because they just, whatever random numbers they decide to come from. I mean, this is really incredible. But this time when it shut the phone off, I just so happened to be looking directly at it when it happened. So I know exactly what happened. And I checked, I didn't lose anything anything I had recorded up to that point. Um, Interesting. Sit tight a minute. I got to think back to where I was now. We're talking about O-U-G-H, talking about dough. Oh, all right. Donuts. Definition of the word, fried dough, leavened dough, as it turns out. Has to have a leavening agent. There's the word, leavened. I had never seen that word before. This is another thing that I learned during the, this is one of the things that's really cool about doing the research for talking about stuff, talking to you about stuff like this, is because as I'm going through it, as I'm doing it, I spent the entire day, just about the entire day yesterday, sitting down behind the terminal, researching this, and part of the day before, and you come across things that you don't anticipate. And now I am not a baker. I'm not a baker smurf. Okay, I can cook a dinner. I can make you a nice dinner, but bacon I'm no good at. One of the reasons I'm no good at it is because you have to follow the recipe to the T. No substitutions that I'm aware of. That makes it very difficult for me because I don't know what a lot of stuff is. I don't know the purpose of it. I don't know, you know. And the other reason is because I really like a lot of things that I could learn how to make. I could learn how to bake real quick and real good. And I'd be even fatter than I am now. I don't want to make it because I'll eat it. However, I am going to learn a little bit about bacon. I'm going to do some experimenting. Hopefully this winter when I get caught up. That's funny. When I get caught up with other things, that is pretty funny. Anyhow, let's get back to our leavened dough. Donut. The word donut is defined as dough, leavened fried dough with other stuff mixed in. And the nut part of it is because supposedly it resembled a nut. It was a nut made of dough, therefore a donut. Now, I find this pretty interesting because most of the history says that while there were some dough balls that would resemble a nut, history says that most of the time they were ring-shaped. And I don't know what sort of nut you would see that is round with a hole in it. So evidently they must have just gone. I guess donuts were named after donut holes, I guess maybe is the way to look at it. Which, donut holes, as far as I ever understood, donut holes were a new thing back in the 70s or the 80s, something like that. No, they weren't. Obviously, they've been around for a long time because that's what the word donut That's where the word comes from. Anyway, let's. I have notes for today, by the way. Um, let's take a look at this and see what's up. The history of, and we're going to refer to it not as donuts. We're going to refer to it as fried dough. And the reason we're doing that is because it wasn't called a donut until much. The word donut wasn't invented. It wasn't coined. Is that the right word? They were not referred to as donuts. Maybe that's the way to put it. Until much later, the practice of frying dough is suspected to have been around for centuries. It's ancient civilizations, which I would assume, ancient civilizations is a very broad term. Okay, because there were ancient civilizations for a long time, and there were ancient civilizations in a lot of places. So if you say ancient civilizations did it, who are you talking about? You talking about everybody? I would assume you're talking about everybody. So you telling me that ancient civilizations everywhere fried dough? I don't know. The actual practice of frying dough has been traced to Mesopotamia, old Mesopotamia. Now, Mesopotamia is an incredibly interesting place because in Mesopotamia something happened that changed the world forever. There was a revolution, and that revolution improved the lives of every person on earth eventually. That revolution was truly earth changing. It was as important to the world, it was as big of a deal as our industrial revolution. It was as big of a deal as our computer revolution. There's actually two revolutions. Uh, it was the agricultural revolution. Back in the day, you didn't have a Winn-Dixie over there on the corner of the street. What you did was you got up in the morning and you were basically a hunter gatherer. You went out and looked for the food, you found it growing, or you went out and looked for the food, you found it running around. You either picked it where it grew, or you shot it where you saw it, shot it with a bow and arrow or a rock or through a rope or ever how they did it. I don't know. I wasn't there. My mom might have been. That's a joke. My mom was old. She's not that old. Um, but you had to go get it. And in the look, I'll put you a map up here. In the Fertile Crescent region of the Middle East, where was Mesopotamia, Kuwait, Mesopotamia is now Kuwait, part of Syria, Iraq, part of Turkey, that area between the Euphrates and the Tigris rivers. There was an area called the Fertile Crescent, and in this Fertile Crescent area, the agricultural revolution took place. What they did was, instead of having to go where the food was growing and find it, instead of having to go run around all day in the fields looking for something that was trying to either kill you or escape you, um, they actually started growing it at home. They came up with farms. They came up with agriculture. So now they could grow their own stuff, or grow their own either plants or animals, because they did it with animals as well. They could grow their own stuff and didn't have to go looking for it. Now, not having to go look for it was a tremendous change in the world. Because first of all, walking out your back door to the field to pick a bunch of corn is much easier, takes less energy than having to go find it out in the field growing somewhere. And when it comes to the animals, I mean, you want to talk about save some energy. Rather than have to go hunt them down in the woods and hope you got them, then towed them all the way back home, you just went out and took them out of the pen you had in the yard. So this agricultural revolution was a huge change in the world, and it affected eventually it affected everyone. So something else happened around that time too, and that is that because they had a whole bunch of food, because they had an abundance of food, people's health changed because they were eating better. But there was another revolution that came with it as well. And that revolution would be the pottery revolution. Because now they suddenly had to have food storage. So they had to come up with ways to do that. And they came up, here's a picture. They came up with ways to store food so they could have it later, which was another tremendous help because it kept the food supply steady and more level. Uh, because there was more food, there was more opportunity to experiment with it. Because if you have to get up every morning and go looking for it and hope you can catch it, when you get it home, that's all you got, and you may or may not have some more tomorrow. You don't know. You don't play around with it a whole lot. You don't experiment with it. You make what you know works because it's all there is. Okay? But with the agricultural revolution, it gave them a little opportunity to be able to experiment some. So frying dough became a practice, a regular practice. And of course, I'm sure they experimented with it. But if they got it wrong, they were much less likely to starve to death from wasting the food. So there's evidence that in Mesopotamia, dough frying was taking place. From there, it goes on to ancient Egypt. I think, is it Egypt? Yes. From there, evidence of frying dough shows up in ancient Egypt. And in ancient Egypt, they made a change to the dough. What they started doing is they started adding honey to the dough itself. So it sweetened it up some. So that was an improvement. From there, it moves on to ancient Greece. There's a picture of ancient Greece. I sure hope I can put those pictures in. I put them in there. In ancient Greece, they came up with the idea of dropping the ring-shaped donuts. And they came up with these things called leucomades. Leucomades, word up there. I didn't look up the pronunciation of that word. I was going to, and I forgot about it. Which I don't. One of the reasons I didn't do it too is because if you read those things that show how to pronounce a word, first of all, they're pretty hard to read. And second of all, you don't know whether you're actually getting it right or not. And the only way you know if you're pronouncing a word correctly is if you actually get it from someone who speaks the language. And then you're going to find that it's pronounced 2 or 3 different ways, depending on what part of the country they live in. Just like it is here in the United States, words are pronounced different a little bit by people who live in different places. So, I don't know. But anyway, there's the word. That's what they did. And what they did was they gave up on the ring shape of donuts, and they started making the little donut balls, and then they would put in them stuff. They would add stuff to it to sweeten it up a little bit. Put a little honey on top was the big trick, and that's interesting because it goes back to donut holes again. It's funny that when I was a kid and I first heard of donut holes, I thought the guy was a genius because here's the hole, the center part of the donut that I assumed was getting thrown away, and somebody said, "Hey, we can fry these, call them donut holes, and this would be great." Well, they've been doing that forever. That's where donut came from. The dough was shaped like a nut, a little round thing. Anyhow, so the donut hole's been around a long time. over, so you go from Mesopotamia to Egypt to Greece, and during this whole time period, um, trade routes began to open up around Europe, Asia, and the Middle East, and there was trading going on, and of course, culinary recipes were were included in that. People's heritage, how they cooked and what they cooked. Uh, Word got around, word spread around. People experimented a little differently because food was more available, and sooner or later, uh, Europe, pretty much the entire, I guess we call it the eastern half of the world, Europe, Asia, uh, they were all they were all frying dough and all frying pretty good stuff. Um, from there, the history of fried dough kind of stagnates. There's about a 200 or 300 year period where uh, the history of fried dough doesn't change much. The recipe doesn't change much. What people did with it doesn't change much. They figured the reason it didn't change very much is because to be able to successfully fry dough, you've got to have good quality oil and you've got to have good clean oil, and there's different types of oil that work better than others. And as it turns out, cooking oil was not necessarily incredibly readily available, nor was it cheap. So the practice kind of settled down, kind of leveled off for a while. Um, as time went on, Europeans ended up uh, emigrating from Europe and Asia into North America, and along with those immigrants came their culinary, came their heritage, came their culinary practices. Um, Around 1680, uh, a name. And you see, up until this point, the word donut had not been in use for a donut. The word donut had not been assigned to that yet. Even though I talked about the definition earlier, that definition didn't come around until later on. Um, Around 1680, in North America, a round piece of fried dough with a hole in the middle was referred to as a doughboy. So they got close, donut, doughboy. Actually, if you think about it, uh, neither of those two words make sense to what you see. If you see a round thing with a hole in it, it doesn't look like a nut. It doesn't look like a doughboy. So I don't know. I can't explain that. All I can tell you is it was around then 1680. They decided that a round donut with a hole in the middle was a doughboy. Uh, the first known use of the actual word donut came around in around 1782, um, and of course, like I said before, they called it a donut because it was made of dough and it looked like a nut. So we're talking about donut holes here, not round donuts with a hole in the middle, or it wouldn't look like a nut. Then around early 1800s, 1810, 1809, 1810, the Dutch people showed up in the United States and started referring to their fried dough as oily cakes. That should be right there. Depends. Anyway, they started calling them oily cakes. Now, I don't know about you, but if I'm looking at a menu and I see the word oily cakes, I'm not real tantalized. It's not real encouraging to run out and go get yourself an oily cake. It just sounds nasty to me. So that word oily cake translates to oily cakes. So that didn't sound too appetizing. At least not it doesn't to me. Uh, Early 1860s, the term donut hole came into use. They were the same thing that you're talking about now, as far as for donut holes go. Um, from there, the humble donut continued its evolution into what it is today. Now, through the years, they filled them with jams and jellies and custards and creams, and they covered them with sugar, and they stuck fruit on the top, and they made them flat like a saucer. They made them round like a nut. They made them round with a hole in the middle like a donut, uh, which is all still made. Really, the donut itself, the evolution of the donut itself has continued. And it's continued up until present day. It's continued to an extreme point. Um, I would imagine if you were to go to every donut shop on the face of the earth and get one of every variety, never duplicating the variety that you've bought before. Okay? So if you bought just one of every variety of donut available with no duplications, you'd probably have millions of donuts. I think donuts have evolved to the point to where it would be hard not to buy. It would be hard to find something that hasn't been put on, stuffed in, or sold with a donut. Now, you may have noticed that through all of this, I have been referring to donuts as donuts, like this, right? That's what they are. That's their official name. That's what they're actually called. But then there's another word that popped up, and that word is donuts, but it's spelled like this. That word donuts originated by people in the United States, which goes to show you how recent it is. It was the United States. By people in the United States just being too lazy to write out the whole thing. Difference between donuts and donuts is 3 letters. And it was easier and quicker to spell without those 3 letters. So that's how the name of the product evolved. Because we don't call them donuts anymore. We call them donuts, which I thought was pretty interesting. So if you think about the latest contribution to the donut worldwide, is actually here in the United States, us condensing the word, taking out some letters that evidently we felt weren't necessary, and cutting it down to just this, donuts. Which I find, I guess those people in Boston who like to spell things wrong would love this, because it still works, but it's not a correct spelling. It's just a word that got made up to describe something with shorter spelling. Oh, one more thing. Just a quick question for you. If you go to a charity event, say you go to a charity event, and you show up with a truckload of donuts, what do you actually call that? A donation. Sorry, I couldn't resist. Anyhow, that's our lesson for today. The humble donut, which has been around for longer than written language has been around. It's evolved quite a bit, yet stayed quite the same. There's a whole bunch of different ways to make them, and they're all pretty much the same. They've always been using. They just get a little more sugar added every single time. Uh, and of course, they're frowned upon by people who are concerned with your health. And if donuts, if you're in a situation where your health could be threatened by donuts, I suggest you avoid them. Um, but it doesn't seem to me that one every once in a while is going to hurt you. I know Molly shows up over here every once in a while. I'll be sitting here in my office in the morning, um, answering comments and working on YouTube stuff, and she'll come walking in with a thing of orange juice and an apple fritter about that big. And I happen to love apple fritters. So you get the opportunity and you can do it. It's not going to affect your health or your well-being. Enjoy a donut once in a while. They're good. Thank you very much for being here. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. And I look forward to talking to you again. Thanks.